By way of a legislative update tonight, we do have with us Representative Jules Bailey, who is in his third term in the House of Representatives, representing inner Southeast Portland, including much of the Cleveland High School attendance area and Cleveland High School. Also joining us later will be Jim Green, Deputy Executive Director, and I'll reintroduce him as well. And I will be happy to answer other questions if there are topics that don't get covered that you might have burning issues about when we're all done. But without further ado, I'd like to turn it over to Representative Bailey.
Thanks, David. And Chair Belle, Chair Gonzalez, Superintendent Smith, and members, it is a real honor to be here today. I'm Jules Bailey. I have the honor of representing House District 42, as David said, inner East, Southeast Portland, and parts of Northeast Portland as well. In fact, Benson High School is also in my district, and Franklin is literally just across the street from my district. So a lot of students who live in my district go to Franklin High School. And it's really fun to be with you here tonight and to be able to share with you some of the things that are happening down in your capital. I want to focus today mostly on the budget and on revenue. I know that that is something that is near and dear to the tough decisions that you make every day, and I want to thank you for your service for our school children in Portland Public Schools. I'm a product of Portland Public Schools myself, and so I'm very happy that all of you are working so hard on behalf of the next generation of children. And I can tell you that, as I'm sure all of you hear from parents in Portland Public Schools, education is extremely high on their list of issues that they care very deeply about. We, as many of you I think attended, we had a town hall with Senator Diane Rosenbaum and Rudy Crew shortly before session at Reed College. The capacity for that room was about 440 people, and as I recall, it was filled to overflowing. So it's clearly the largest turnout for any town hall that I've had has been for the subject of education. So with that in mind, as we went into the legislative session, we then looked at the challenges I'm sure all of you have of yet another budget shortfall. And how do we create a budget in the Oregon legislature that not only stops the decline that we've seen in school funding, that arrests the brutal cuts that we've seen to public education, but starts to reverse that trend? And how do we put that together to add back to a public education system that has been lauded nationally, and to build that improvement back into the system, not just on a temporary basis, but on a structural basis going forward? The budget shortfall, as I'm sure you know, is somewhere in the neighborhood of about $1 billion. And so as we're looking at a combination of ways to make that up, we've got several levers that we can pull. The co-chair's budget, when it came out, pegs the funding for education at $6.75 billion. That number is made up from a couple of different pieces of the puzzle. I would call that number a good start. I'm supportive of the co-chair's budget, but frankly, I would like to see more than that. Our kids deserve more than that. And the co-chair's budget includes within it $275 million of new revenue. And I think the revenue piece of this is very important. As we talk about in the legislature, this is really going to be a budget that's based on shared sacrifice, about asking a lot of people to step up, and to step up when it hurts a little bit, to build a budget that's good for the next generation. And we're starting to put together that number of what that $275 million revenue package looks like, and there are strong voices out there to see if there's a way that we can look at levers that go above that number to put together a more robust package and to really focus on that shared sacrifice aspect. As we're looking at some of the principles that are in place for what constitutes that revenue package, I want to start by giving you just a brief bit of history, and then I'll go into a little bit more detail. As I think many of you know, Oregon is one of the first states in the nation to institute a process to automatically sunset and review all tax credits. Not all tax expenditures. Tax credits are a subset of expenditures, and we are continuing the effort to expand that process to expenditures. But we were one of the first states to sunset all tax credits. That means that they now expire on a 6-year cycle. We look at those tax expenditures to see whether or not they make sense, and bring them up for review. I had the honor of co-chairing the first Joint Committee on Tax Credits last session, and we saved almost 75% of the tax credit money that was going out the door in that round of tax expenditures. Many of it savings from the business energy tax credit that you've seen many headlines about. But those are dollars that, while they were sometimes achieving important goals, are also dollars that are very important for public education. We'll be continuing that process in this session and looking at a next round of expiring tax credits. We also will be looking very closely at other tax expenditures. And some of the proposals that have been talked about out there have been things like, are there ways that we can ask folks who are doing very well in this economy to perhaps phase out or cap the kinds of deductions that they might take for things like second homes or very expensive home mortgage deductions over $1 million or various levels like that. There's also a number of tax expenditures that are out there that have been shown to be less effective, things like the additional medical deduction, which is really just focused on the high income people. I sometimes like to call it the Botox deduction because it's for a lot of elective kinds of medical procedures, things that aren't really making our community stronger but are costing us money. And so I think you'll see a lot of focus as we go forward on how do we, in a fair way, ask those who are doing well to scale back at the top end some of those deductions, whether through some sort of phase out or some sort of cap. And then I want to focus on an issue that I know is very important to all of you and has been extremely important to me. And I have to turn to David and say a big thank you to David for all of his work on this issue in the legislature. And that's the issue of structural reform around our property tax system. We've now had an enormous amount of experience, 23 years of experience with ballot measure 5, about 18 years of experience with ballot measure 50. And while there were principles that led voters to enact those constitutional changes in the first place, it is time in this legislative session that we take a hard look at how we make that system more fair, more equitable, and to unshackle local governments and school boards from being able to support their schools in the ways that their communities want to support their school system and their service system. This is one of my top priorities for this legislative session, and I feel very good about our chances of being able to get a referral to the voters on allowing local option levies to be able to more adequately fund public services in schools outside of compression limits. We also have another one around addressing reset at resale. And the help of school districts around the state and of local governments around the state on pushing that issue forward would make a very significant difference to Portland Public Schools. I don't have to tell you what it would mean to recent levies that we've passed if we had had those measures in place at the time that voters voted on them. Our community supports public education. It's willing to make the hard choices to step up and do it. I would never take those choices for granted, but I respect those choices. And when our voters choose to step up and fund public education, it is important that everybody pays in equally and that we honor the sacrifice that they're making by making sure the full amount of those dollars goes to school districts and achieve the ends the voters voted for. So we are making progress. It is my hope that we'll get that out. And I'm very much looking forward to hearing from all of you about the issues that are on your mind. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any questions? We can stop here.
Is it a House bill that's reforming Measure 5 that you're working on?
Yes, Chairs and Ms. Garcia, the bill is HJR 8 and HJR 13 are two bills. HJR 8 is the bill that is a referral to the voters to deal with local option levies. HJR 13 is a referral to the voters to deal with the issue of property value reset from between assessed value and market value at transaction.
That's great.
Cool.
Is there a separate measure about urban renewal districts? Or it's not included in this, it's a separate measure?
That is a separate measure, and that is one that I think is highly likely to move forward. I think there's broad support for it. In fact, there was we had a hearing on it in the House Revenue Committee, and it was the first I'd heard of the measure, and I got up, walked out of the House Revenue Committee, went and signed on to the bill. So I'm feeling pretty good about its passage.
Good. That's another one that will help us significantly.
Yep. And I think is very consistent with the intent of urban renewal.
Well, I guess, thank you so much, Representative Bailey. Do you have any suggestions for us on how we can help support this? Both us as board members and then just the audience at home, all the folks that are tuning in because they care about education.
Thank you for the question. And I think for all of you as board members and especially for those folks at home, I think the legislature can at times become a bit of a bubble down in Salem, and it is extremely important that folks keep the urgency on, that there is pressure for more money to education. It is effective, and that you're communicating with your legislators to help them hold strong in the face of sometimes very tough negotiations. I think sometimes people think, oh, my legislator is good on that issue. I don't need to talk to them about it because they'll vote the right way. But I can tell you it's very helpful as a legislator to have school board members, to have community members writing us and calling us and emailing us and showing up in the Capitol when they can, because it allows us to go to the bargaining table with a stronger hand and say, hey, this is really important to my community, really important to local elected officials in my district. We have to hold strong on that.
I think that's really important, especially for parents to be speaking out and realize, I mean, as you say, even if they know their legislator is doing the right thing, that it gives their legislator that backup, that to be able to say, I'm getting all these letters, I'm getting all these calls. And sometimes I hear parents say, well, I don't want to complain, and they keep hearing it, and it's like, I keep telling them, please complain, or speak up and tell your story and how it affects your child and your family and your community. So if I can just take a second of airtime to put in a plug, just Google Oregon, find your legislator, and you can write in your address, and it'll scroll down, and you can see who your state representative and state senator is if you don't know already, and they are good, or you can call the office, and the good people there will talk to you. So I really appreciate your taking the time to bring this forward and all the work that you're doing.
Thank you.
So I want to thank you again. I know that your leadership has been really appreciated in Salem this legislative session, and I just want to reiterate that almost putting it as tough negotiations almost softens it. There are people that are philosophically opposed to some of these ideas and will be calling and will be contacting and will be visiting, and so I just want to reiterate that if this is important to our community, which I consistently hear that it is, that it's our responsibility to help our legislators understand what that means. So thank you very much for being here tonight, and thank you for your leadership.
Thank you very much. Very well said.
Thank you, and as he steps away, I want to give special thanks to Representative Bailey. I know he appreciates, and I honestly did not plant him with a plug for my work, but he really has been a stalwart champion of the property tax reform, to the point of where there have been moments where I think there's been doubt in the legislature about, say, viability. He's been the one in the caucus and in chambers saying, no, this has got to be on our agenda. This is a way that we can help schools in addition to a strong budget as well. So many thanks to you, Representative. Appreciate it.
Thank you.